I'd never listened to La Russell before until I saw one of his freestyles pop up on my For You page on TikTok, and I was instantly hooked. I'd heard rumblings about his music before, heard rumblings about his ingenuity in marketing and building community by hosting concerts in his backyard, like his literal backyard of where he grew up. And I thought, wow, like finally an artist that's actually into the art of things, into being creative, into creating a new way, a new path forward into building their community and finding their tribe. But I was stopped in my tracks when I heard the opening lyrics for the song. I had never heard that song before, and he was performing it live, and it was with the passion and the intensity that like made me bookmark that video and make sure to at least quote the first lyrics at the top of this episode. So let me quote it for you. I ain't got no money to the pastor. They keep my on a leash. They feel religion. They fed religion to the slaves. They taught a how to preach. I swear this system got me beat. No matter how much know, I just can't seem to get away. No matter how far to go. No matter what car drive. No matter what house and own. Just know you gon' always be a. So go ahead and sing your songs. There's so many reasons why those lyrics touch me. First of all, he's just saying it. You know what I mean? He's calling the bluff. He's saying, yo, we as Black people need to have a conversation about how important Christianity is into our way of life and how it's created this subsect of individuals who police us by the standards of whiteness because Christianity was given to us by the white people to dominate us. I love how bold and brash he's speaking on this track. I love how it's straight, no chaser. It's simple, but it's all true. It's all true. Today we're going to talk about slavery and Christianity. And I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off, but hey, this is my podcast. If you're mad about it, make your own podcast about it. How about we do that? Welcome to Bloodstained episode 6. Black people should not be Christian. Let's talk about it. Now, I know this is similar to my Kanye Was Right, Slavery Was a Choice video title, where people were like, oh my God, this title's crazy. But it's like, come in, sit down. I'm trying to get your attention. But we're going to talk about all the things. We'll get to why I'm saying that in a moment. We'll get there. But come in, sit down, and listen to me talk to you. That's me trying to pull you into a conversation. I have a very complicated relationship with organized religion. I grew up in the church. Obviously, I'm a Black girl in the United States, West Indian descent. So yeah, I mean, Christianity and Black people throughout our diaspora, they go hand in hand. And it's always introduced to us in this very violent, dominating way. We'll get to other things about that. But I grew up Christian. I grew up Seventh-day Adventist. I went to church basically almost every Saturday of my young adult life until I was like 18. I went to college and I kind of just Saturdays became another day to like relax and do other stuff. And I never really got back into the routine after that. What I will say is my parents had a unique view of religion based on their life experiences and what they wanted to impart on us. So we grew up in a household that loved critical thinking, that loved everybody, hyper tolerant, all types of different types of people were running through our house and my family friends and all of that kind of thing. And it was never used as a tool to condemn and to shame. It was always used as a tool of love, tolerance, giving, always. And, you know, and a part of me really appreciates growing up that way. I'll get into that into the conclusion. But I want people to understand that I'm coming at this as somebody who was steeped in religion, steeped in the church. But my family on the outside of that also was very instrumental in inspiring me to ask these questions and not just be obedient, and kind of helped me learn to understand that there are many ways to be spiritual. There are many ways to be religious. There are many ways to have reverence for a higher power. And it doesn't always have to be judgmental and shaming in a way to control. But I would be remiss if I didn't take a step back and say that a lot of people, Black people in particular, who participate in religion, use it the exact same way that white people used it for us. So let's get into that. A lot of y'all are looking for ways to be better than people. A lot of y'all are looking for ways to be judgmental and to place yourself as a better individual than someone else. And that's not what religion is all about. It just frankly is not. You're missing the entire plot. And I think that organized religion rewards this kind of behavior. And that's why I don't like to engage in the Black Christian politic that is very apparent and very obvious in a lot of our churches. Point blank, period. I myself personally am still like figuring out like my true feelings about religion, my true feelings about organized religion, like how I truly feel about these things and how I want to impart that with my future family and what I'm going to do. This is something that is a constant thought in my mind in terms of like the age that I'm at, you know? And I think a lot of Black kids or kids in general who grew up religious can come to this point in their life where they're figuring out how they're going to do it, if they're going to do it, how they're going to do it differently, if they're going to do it. And I'm kind of at that place. You know, I honestly think church should be a place of helping people, like action first, volunteering first, providing things for the community first. And then from there, you know, maybe you do preach to people about specific things in the Bible, but I think it's just important to be action-based. So to me, a perfect church, and I hope to create a community like this in my lifetime, would be a church that provides free childcare for people in the community. It would be a church that provides, you know, clinics, you know, doctors doing volunteer work, hosting clinics so people can have their physical checkups. I mean, job fairs, providing hot meals for the community like several times out of the week, providing a place for homeless people to shower or to like wash their clothes or to live with dignity, providing something that the community needs. And so far, what I've been seeing is that religion has turned into this kind of succubus that kind of sucks and sucks and sucks all the resources in the community. And instead of giving back to the community, which would bring an endless supply of people in through those doors because you're actually helping them with their day-to-day lives, instead, it's just kind of like, give me money, please, money now. And I just hate that. I hate that. Honestly, my ideal church would be similar to like the People's Temple before Jim Jones went down the rabbit hole, like growing food, community gardens, people working together, people providing housing for the elderly and care in that community. Like that's how I would vibe it out. But, you know, a lot of people would say, be careful, you know, she's a cult girl or whatever. But I truly, truly think that like religion at its core is about action and acts of service. I personally feel like there's no better way to like witness than by like actually helping people out of their material circumstances. This is my issue with how religion shows up in the traditional sense, particularly in the Black community, a community that has had a history of being able to use religion correctly. It is absolutely like undeniable to see the effects, the negative effects that Christianity, white Christianity has had on the Black community. It has caused so much divisiveness, like even on social media lately, like hearing Black Christians, Black American Christians talk about Haitian people and how they deserve what they get because they, you know, worship voodoo, or, you know, they curse themselves because of the voodoo, or, you know, people talking about the Palestinian people and saying like what Krishan Rock said, that like the Palestinian people deserve it because they're not Christian. Like these things disgust me. It's the brain rot and the brainwashing that Christianity, as it's been used in the modern day over generations, it's the brain rot that makes me kind of disgusted by it as a whole. Because the truth is, this is an inherited thing. Like, this isn't something that our people would naturally, like, if everyone stayed on their sides, and certain global events didn't occur, we wouldn't necessarily be exposed to specific religions. And those religions have become central in how we live our day-to-day lives. And it's a huge disservice for us to exist in the Western world and not have conversation about that, and not really put 20 on 10 when it comes to how Black people became Christian and that kind of dominant situation and what Christianity was used for, to control us. And in order to contend with that, we just have to be real and admit that, instead of pushing that away and pushing that out of the ministry. And because that ministry was inherited from white people to control how we moved as enslaved individuals, I think that we lost a lot of our connection as Indigenous people to the wonders of a higher power and the beauty of life in general, because we are adopting a way of thinking about the world that was meant for a very specific purpose. You know what I mean? To me, I think that Christianity and a lot of religions, if for those with the audio, I put my palm up to signify, white religions. There is this idea of putting oneself above nature. There's this need to be in the image of God, and because I'm in the image of God, I'm above what would naturally occur anyway. It's not this idea of living within, being a part of the food chain, being a part of earth and nature and existing within those confines. It's this idea of domination. It's this idea that I can control nature. I can control nature to bend to my will. And because of that, I think that has led us down the path in so many other respects that is just completely negative. Like, Black people, the enslaved people, obviously, and we'll talk more about this in slavery and the economy, but this idea that, like, now as Black people, we used to be extremely musical. We used to be extremely connected to the earth, so extremely connected to growing our own food and all of that kind of stuff, because it was a necessity, but also because that's what we were forced to do. We had so much expertise about the land and cultivating it, but because we existed within the parameters of this view of nature as a lesser being, which is a direct correlation with white Christianity being above nature, we have lost a lot of skills that are important for us to be able to pass down generation to generation, which were integral in our survival in some of the most extreme circumstances. Indigenous peoples were already well aware of the environment that they lived within and worshipped it in all of its beauty, in all of its different variations. They knew that the areas in California were prone to fire, so they dealt with nature within that context. They knew that the Gulf of Mexico was prone to big storms, tropical storms, hurricanes, so they dealt with that terrain as they should have. And that's why their civilizations lasted such a long time, because we're not making God or the higher power we worship a person. You know what I mean? We're not making him in our image so that we can feel validated in what we want to use the Bible for. Indigenous people existed within the context of where they existed, and that was a big part of their culture and their identity and their religion and their worship. And through that, they were able to live in a coexisting way with the moods of nature, with the ebbs and flows of nature, and not constantly be trying to dominate something that cannot be changed. To me personally, God is in the nature. God is in these things that we can't explain, these wonders, these beauties. God is in our physiology, our anatomy, how we're created, how we're put together. That is evidence of a higher power to me, but I don't see myself as above those things. I see myself within those things, and I think most indigenous religions put the person put the being in context to the things that they can't change. And because of the white lens of needing to be all powerful, almighty, the association between what God looks like and how God acts as a rational person is very much through the lens of Western society, point blank, period. Evidence is recently, specifically, I've seen a lot of articles. There's this one article about a chimpanzee that knew where to go to get a specific plant to heal a scar that they had, or like a big gash that they had, and how they treated that on their own. And this idea that even the animals understand how to work with nature, how to heal themselves through nature, through the natural remedies. And all of this has been, scientists are discovering it now, but it had already been discovered and discussed widely with indigenous people, within their nature, within their traditions, within their religions. It all had already been discussed, but because they were indigenous people and thought to be uncivilized, here comes the racial hierarchy once again, those contributions were not built upon, they were burnt down so that white people could rediscover it in 2024. Don't get me started, I'm ranting. But you get what I mean, right? So because of this thing where we have inherited this religion that isn't natural to our culture that we're from, isn't natural to our state of being, but through world events out of our control now is our religion, you can see how it's like, it feels like a hand-me-down. You know what I mean? It feels like it doesn't fit. It feels like, there are aspects that don't apply to us truly in our day-to-day lives. There's reasons why, in the South, who said this? Someone said this. Someone famous said this, that the most segregated day of the week is, high noon on a Sunday in the South, because the churches are still very segregated. It's an idea. It's a book. It's an object. It's text. It's text from a certain period of time that had been distilled by many people. It is a tool. And so to look at it all negative and to look at it all positive removes the idea that there is a human person taking this tool and interpreting it how it wants to interpret it. And from that experience, you start to think about, okay, why are they choosing to use the Bible to justify slavery? Who is using religion to do that? How is religion being taught to Black people in its first iteration? How is Christianity being taught, shall I say, to Black people in its first iteration? And why does it always have to start with control? But because we remove that aspect by saying, oh, fuck religion, or like religion is the most positive thing to ever exist and everyone should be religious, you remove the human nature aspect of it, which is an important thing to discuss because, well, like I said, religion is but a tool. It's but a hammer, that someone's picking up to do their bidding. A hammer in the hands of a carpenter could be a beautiful thing that creates something. A hammer in the hands of a sociopath could be a horrific murder weapon that can ruin and destroy someone's life. That's all that religion is. Do I believe in a higher power? Yes. But do I believe in a higher power through the eyes of another person? No. I believe in the higher power that I want to choose and select. I believe in a higher power that pushes people to be kind, that pushes people to be loving and to lead without judgment, that pushes people to respect nature and to respect their neighbor. Like, that is what I move with. And that's what I chose to take from my experience growing up religious, which is not what everyone chooses to take from it. Some people are addicted to the socialization. Some people are addicted to the power that they have within the confines of religion. And we cannot talk about Black people's slavery and religion without discussing the personal motivations that draw people to those religions, that draw people to interpret what they interpret from those religions. Like the same God that was used to justify race-based chattel slavery, that was one of the most horrific true crime stories of our day, period, is the same Lord and Savior that provided those enslaved individuals with hope to wake up for a better tomorrow. And that's just something that like needs to be discussed more openly as Black people engage in Christianity. These conversations are necessary to have. I'm not saying abolish religion, abolish organized religion, especially because there's so many people that I love in my life that enjoy the community, and I enjoy it. I've benefited from it. I love those people to this day, a lot of those people. But at the same time, it's disingenuous to me as Black people engaging in being Christian to not talk about some of the complexities of being Black and being Christian and what that means and like what you kind of take out of that situation. And I think a lot of times people want to avoid that conversation in general. So let's bring it back to slavery really quick. Like, okay, let me put it into perspective to see how recent, for a lot of us, at least, you know, for a lot of Black Americans specifically, how recent the introduction of slavery in concert with our existence is. Like, let's talk about it, because a lot of people kind of touch on it, but they don't put the dates down so you can really understand like how late in the game slavery became Christianity and slavery became a priority, what caused it to become more of a priority. All of these things relate to each other. By 1800, most slaves in the United States had not been converted to Christianity. So that's 1800, mind you, according, if we're going by like the average concept of when slavery in North America started, they say 1619. So by 1800, which is over 180 years after 1619, most slaves in the United States, most enslaved people in the United States were not Christian yet. That's interesting. Towards the tail end of slavery, mind you, slavery ended in 1865, ended, quotations for those who are on the DSPs listening to audio, ended in 1865. So towards the end of slavery in North America, in the Americas, in the United States, is when majority of enslaved people were converted, which means that the majority of enslaved people in the United States for the majority time of slavery lived and died and were not converted to being Christian. So then a bunch of questions open up, right? Like we have to, let's talk about it. Let's talk it through. A bunch of questions start to open up, because it's like, okay, so why? What changed? Why would they all of a sudden add in Christianity and converting their enslaved population to being Christian at the tail end of slavery? Makes you wonder. But in the years after, there was a huge blast in popularity when it came to Protestant evangelicalism. I don't know if I said that right, which is, of course, something that pushed individuality. If you've been on my TikTok, I've talked about Protestantism, the tenets of Protestantism, and how they if you superimpose them with the tenets of capitalism, they're basically the same fucking thing, but that's a conversation for another day. This time period specifically was like the first of a large scale conversion of enslaved men and women, like early 1800s. It wasn't until the Second Great Awakening in the late 18th century, early 19th century, that there was a focused effort to include and even cater the preaching styles to the enslaved population. Okay, it wasn't until the Second Great Awakening that this became a popular thing. This is important. Methodist and Baptist ministers used plain language and incorporated aspects of the religions that these people carried with them from Africa, including spirit possession, call and response, singing, dancing, and of course shouting. So you see, this is important. I need to pause here. This is why I love sociology. These things like get pulled in as different things are happening. Everything informs the other. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So you're seeing that there's a shift in explosion and focusing and catering to messaging being specifically for enslaved people. Why? Let's talk about it. There's catering, not only catering, including aspects of their own religion, their traditional religions from where they came from, in hopes to rebrand Christianity to be something that this specific population will enjoy and support and lap up. You know what I mean? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how Christianity is branded. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how even the things that we think are things that we made up within religion, within expressing Christianity, are things that were specifically tailored so that we would accept white Jesus. Girl. So the earlier generations of evangelical preachers were often extremely opposed to the institution of slavery. Think the Quakers, think people, early abolitionists, Seventh-day Adventists have a history of being anti-slavery. And it's on the principle, you know what I mean? They were anti that shit. But in the early 19th century, the feeling around slavery when it came to Christianity began to shift into staunch support of it. Protestant clergymen began to justify slavery using the Christian hierarchy, claiming that slaves were bound to their masters and needed to always obey them. Okay. Of course, to the slave masters, Christianity became more palatable because it was preaching what they wanted the world to reflect about their position in society, of course. So once it underscored their way of life, of course, there was a huge push to convert their enslaved populations and even to introduce biracial churches so that their slaves or their enslaved populations could be indoctrinated the right way. Let's pause here. This is, again, important. This idea that even though there is a very strong religious undertone to religion in the United States, specifically Christianity, it wasn't until people saw the messaging could be beneficial for business. Hello, nothing moves without money here. That is when they were like, convert everybody. We're going to open up churches so the enslaved people can sit and listen, and that's what they're going to do. And we're going to associate that day with being a day of rest, so they look forward to that day because they're not on the fields doing this stuff. And so a kind of false equivalency is brought on by the day because they are using it to indoctrinate the enslaved population of this way of thought, which is that I am in charge of you. You are bound to me. Your whole purpose is to serve me. And because that's now what religion is discussing and it's not anti-slavery anymore, you're going to church every Sunday and I'm going to make sure you rest on that day so you show up to church so you're brainwashed, but also so you associate that day with the day of rest in your head. Hello? Let's talk about it. The truth is, beyond the point of view of their white masters, religious expression being controlled by white people only had its limitations. A slave preacher may preach one thing under the purview of the whites, but may preach another thing when they're alone, if you know what I mean. Sans Nat Turner, for example. Instead of blind submittal and obeying the masters, they preached about suffering and salvation. Many Negro spirituals have a theme of suffering and redemption. They centralize Moses as a figure. They identify with leading their own people to freedom. On some occasions, these songs held secret messages of rebellion, places to meet up, and directions for escape. So this is where it gets complicated, right? Because the initial inception was to control. But as people learned to read, as people were able to interpret the words of the Bible themselves, and more Black preachers were important to the institution of slavery, so more people were taught to read so they can be preachers to their own people, they started to flip and reverse it. Them verses, the verses in the Bible that were, on one hand saying slavery is all cool and well and using the Bible to justify slavery in their positionality, there are other verses in the Bible that directly unravel that thought. And once those people got to them other verses, now religion became a hotbed of organizing. Now religion became a hotbed of secret communications in terms of trying to seek freedom, which I think is something that white people did not. They always underestimate us. I don't know why they continue to do so, but that's not something they had in their cards. Well, there were some like masters who obviously understood like this was good for business, and that's kind of why I'm pushing my enslaved population to go to, to be Christians. There are others that actually believe the messaging, because why wouldn't you? It's something you want to hear. So they would build chapels and invite other ministers to come preach to their enslaved population because they actually believed it. Despite the motive, the execution was the same, right? The motive behind it may have been, I actually believe it, or I am just doing it for the good of business. But what the result of that was the same. In the 1820s and 30s, two of the most significant slave rebellions led by Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner were based in religion. In 1829, David Walker's inflammatory text, An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, not only condemned Christians that sponsored slavery, yikes, but also made great arguments for slaves to revolt in the name of slavery, in the name of Christianity. The cat's out of the bag. And the control and the monopoly on how someone is supposed to understand religion cannot be contained at this point. So now what they thought was going to be a great way to control people has turned into one of the most dangerous things they could have taught people. They are using the same rhetoric that they were taught to prove that they don't deserve to be treated this way. Except I know that others will attack me for these essays, but I'm writing them to inspire the African American community. I'm fully aware in making this appeal to my much afflicted and suffering brethren that I shall not only be assailed by those whose greatest earthly desires are to keep us in abject ignorance and wretchedness, and who are of the firm conviction that heaven has designed us and our children to be slaves and beasts of burden to them and their children. Now, that was a long excerpt from what I just referenced before, 1829, David Walker's inflammatory text, An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. And he's basically saying exactly what I said. He's basically talking about how this is fundamentally mutually exclusive. To say that you are a Christian and you believe in God and you believe that God made us in his image and he, loves us and all of these things, and we're being faithful to him, and he's a good person, he's all knowing, all of these things, then why would he make you a slave, and why would he make them white? Why is it that religion only benefits one person? Why is that? He's pointing these things out and using it as a rallying cry to organize enslaved people to think for themselves about religion. If these things that they are telling you are true, right, and they're using that to say that you're going to be forever in subordination to us, what does that mean for your life? It means that you have no control over your life. And even in the religion you're choosing to associate yourself with, you are a lesser being, period. In response to this, in Virginia and South Carolina, and of course all throughout the South, there was a crackdown on the gatherings of enslaved people and Black preaching without white supervision, particularly after things like Nat Turner and rebellions like that. While the Black church movement was tamped out in the South, Black churches flourished in the North. The Black and white man was equally in the pathway, in the full capability and ability of, dispensing religion. That idea and that concept helped Black people be ordained as ministers in the North, even though this didn't, stop discrimination and racism within the religious field in general. It allowed an alternative way up for Black people in the North. You can be ordained as a minister, you can have your church, you can exist in this religious space almost free of the ever-present watchful eye of whiteness and white supremacy. You could organize, you could preach how you wanted to within the confines of religion, because you were talking and being Christian. That saved you from further scrutiny of what you could be saying, even though religion was very obviously being used as a tool of revolution and rebellion and revolutionary thought in both places for Black people, enslaved or free. During the antebellum period, though, and after the Civil War, the Black church kind of took on a new social place in this new world that we were traversing together, nationwide. It offered a lot of refuge for the African American community without the watchful eye of white people, like I said, from oppression, and focus on the political needs of the Black community. So not just a religious theory, but we were focusing on the right now. What do we need? Who needs what? How can we mutually aid? How can we crowdfund? How can we make sure people get fed? How can we help the people in our community? It filled the gap that society was not filling. It filled the gap that the government was not filling. So now people were in this place of, okay, the way that we don't know what the future holds, because the future has never been like this. Slavery has been the norm for hundreds of years at this point. So as we try and find our place in society, in this new society that everyone's trying to work out, within the confines of whiteness, so we are only allotted what they're willing to give up and give us within this new society, the Black church stepped up. People were getting fed, people were getting housed, people were able to get rides places. Like, it became a community first place, all about service, which is important, which goes kind of to like what I want and what I mean by like how I'm on the fence about like Christianity and religion in my day-to-day life as a woman growing up. You know, that's what I want church to revert back to, especially in times like this, like helping people in your community pay off their student loans, providing some sort of housing, providing some sort of food, doing something like that. And I get it. You need money to do that, but you also don't. You need more so you need people willing to volunteer their time, and you need to inspire people to want to help those around them. And thinking of creative ways to buy in. The only way to win people's trust is if you're helping their material circumstances change. If you are able to feed the community 3 times a week a hot dinner, you know, whoever comes, it's no pressure. You don't have to sign shit. Bring your kids. You will eat something. You know what I mean? People will become dependent on that and begin to build community amongst the people that go to get a hot meal 3 times a week. If you expanded that to 5 days a week, what could you see? If you expanded that to the weekend, if you also expanded that to once a month, having the doctors in the community volunteer their time to put on a clinic so people can, without insurance, can have dental, eye care, physical, something so that they know that they're well, get their labs done for free. What about collecting ways and resources for people to be able to get a hold of? How can I get cheap medication? A lot of this is about people not knowing how to do the things they need to do in order to exist and survive, and not having the foundation of knowledge. Are we going to put on, housing seminars? Are there people willing to take people in? Like, what can we do? You know what I mean? Backpack drives, clothing for the kids, winter coat drives. All of these things are important. Supporting local businesses, having people participate in night markets, and don't get me talking too much about it, for real, because this is something my sister and I talk about all the time, about like, if we won the lottery, we'd go to church and like change it completely, because we'd have the money to be like, shut the fuck up and let us do what we want to do. But that's how you change. You see, even in this story of Black people and Christianity, Black Americans and Christianity, the role of Christianity, the role of the church has shifted about 3 different times in this podcast. It was what the white people wanted. Then it was what the Black people wanted. Then there was a crackdown, and then it became what the community needed. Do you see what I mean? And so for people to have kind of like these hard and fast rules that are so like, fuck religion, or religion is the only answer kind of thing, when religion itself has changed and flowed through time based on what's needed at the time. I think we need to update religion to what we need at the time. I think what I want to do is just kind of, in conclusion, I had fun filming this episode. I was worried about it, but I feel good saying what I need to say. Let me just round it off and say this. Religion is a tool. It's not innately anything. It's not innately good. It's not innately bad. It's whatever the person picking up that tool is projecting on it. It can be a powerful for good and powerful for bad source. It really can be. But it's incredibly important to see how we as a Black community and our history specifically with Christianity informs our lack of critical thinking and our lack of questioning if we're not involving that in our religious experience. If we're not also talking about how weird it is that we were introduced to this way of thought through domination and how we have to contend with that as Black people, you are not creating a community of people who are critical in their mind in terms of what is right and what's wrong, and working on that, and working on people who are willing to question society that be. Religion isn't a set thing. But as Black people, if you're planning on using religion to use it as white people used it to dominate other groups of marginalized people instead of accepting all and being in community with all, which is in our ministry as a people, you are using it wrong. And that is why you will not see the true fruits of your labor in an actual sustainable way. That is why churches are dying now. The selfishness that exists within the church by the people. Because again, it's not the religion that's the problem. It's the people interpreting that religion for their own favor, for their own notoriety, for their own ego. There's a reason why there was an influx in preachers, people, Black men wanting to be preachers after Martin Luther King, because they wanted to be Martin Luther King. It wasn't because they saw a man helping his community and became something by helping his community by taking action. They saw someone who had notoriety and they associated that with his background with being a preacher. So then you have a whole generation of people who weren't called to being a preacher. They became a preacher for the power that they saw one man wield by being a preacher, right? So then all of those people now are preachers. All those people have churches. All those people are now in religion, to me, dispensing religion. That is a very beautiful thing to share amongst another human being. They're dispensing it from the place of ego, from the place of self, because that's why they got into this business. So now you have corruption. Now you have this distinct moving away from the church being a place of service to the community. That is why churches don't pay taxes, y'all, because they're supposed to be a net positive for the community. Everything they do is to be of service to the community. They don't pay taxes for that reason. But now you're seeing pastors in, Pastor Whitehead, all these pastors in Gucci suits and all of this vanity, all of this bullshit to flex, using people's money to go on vacation, launder it, buy homes, buy cars. Religion isn't supposed to be sexy. Religion isn't supposed to be like a lifestyle. Religion isn't supposed to be like that. Religion is supposed to be created with the goal in mind to help people, to help individuals, to help better your community, to help build the fibers of community back, to build trust and to sow love within the community. That is what religion is supposed to be. And that's how it was. That's why there was such great community organizing, through the Jim Crow South, through the civil rights movement. That's why it was the natural base for all of the modern revolutionary movements henceforth, because it was naturally a place of community building and love and dispensing a certain type of messaging. When you preach from ego, when ego is a central reason why you're involved in this, so much bullshit runs amok. People talking shit, people not caring about people's community, people in competition with each other in the church, people not being service-based, people thinking me, this will make me look good, da. That is the antithesis to something like religion. Religion is selflessness personified. Religion is helping your neighbor without expecting anything in return. Religion is supposed to be those things. It's supposed to be your moral code and your tenets, and not just what you repeat in church, but actually how you live it. The fact that religion is used to judge other people within our community, to judge gay people, trans people, all sorts of different people, I think is also deplorable. At the end of, and to persecute women, on top of that, Black women specifically, who are the backbone of the Black community and are the backbone of the Black church in general. All of these things, the layers within it, who we marginalized and maligned through religion, who are in our very own community for no reason. We have to take control of the plot. And if we're going to engage in religion, in organized religion, then we have to engage with it with our critical caps on and discuss where it came from, why it was introduced to us, and how we contend against that, how we flipped it and reversed it the first time, how we made it about freedom, how we made it about dignity and quality of life, and how that helped us propel our message and push our issue, instead of just being stagnant in this me, this will make me feel good, this will make me look good, I'm the biggest preacher here, look at all these people, I'm getting all this money. It's not about that. It was never about that. At least when Black people took control of the narrative. So, that being said, I just want to say, my usual Black Lives Matter, Free Palestine until it's backwards, a link in the bio to all my socials. I love you guys so much. Please 5 stars this podcast. Thank you. The 5 stars, the ratings are going up, so I'm loving that for you guys. I'm loving that for us. So yeah, please remember to do all of those things. Link in the bio for donating if you have any extra money to Baby Judy, to Hassan and his family who are trying to escape Gaza. Those GoFundMes are the top. I also have 2 more GoFundMe links. One is for humanitarian aid for those African migrant workers that were stranded in Lebanon during the bombings with Israel. The bombing campaigns that have been recently going on. So donate money there. Or consider donating money to my humanitarian aids link, where I have a bunch of links of different organizations in Congo, Sudan, and Palestine. So again, you should do that. Anyway, Black Lives Matter, Free Palestine until it's backwards. I love you guys, and stay tuned for next month for the next episode. We're going to talk about slavery and the economy. Let's do it. Mwah.